Okay. Hello and welcome to Elaine Online, where I do book reviews and chat about a variety of different subjects. And today my little buddy Panther has decided to come and help me out. Today I take a look at two novels that I read back in the 1970s when I was in high school. Recently, I've read them again, and I've still found them to be interesting stories and definitely commentaries on the human experience. The first novel, Day of the Triffids, was published in 1951. It follows the main character, Bill, who's a biologist and worked with Triffids. The novel covers a 6-year period, and it definitely is interesting to see the different viewpoints. Although humans have the same goal of continuing their civilization, there are some very different ideas about what that looks like. Our character Bill, in the beginning of the novel, is waiting to find out whether he still has his sight, as he was injured at work by a Triffid that almost blinded him. Bill discovers that, ironically, it is the Triffids that saved his sight, because his eyes were bandaged when there was a meteor shower, and he discovers that the majority of the human population is now blind, with only a few people sighted to carry on. The story begins as he's waiting for the doctor to arrive and take off the bandages to see if the process was successful. And he begins to notice that not only has the nurse not come in with his breakfast, but the street is unusually quiet. And he decides to wait patiently, thinking, people are just running late. But as the time goes on and he hears the bell, the clock chime the hour, he decides to finally take the bandages off himself. Lucky for him, he still has his sight, but he's discovered the world has changed dramatically. The other character in the story are, of course, the Triffids, and they're tall plants that have a stinger on top and 3 small stalks near their base that they use to communicate. They were bioengineered, supposedly in Russia, which tells you a bit about when this novel was written. The oil companies discovered that this plant produces a product that is highly effective and profitable, so they begin to farm the plants in contained areas because they do realize that the plants present a danger, but they've decided that for economic and profit reasons, it's worth the risk. Some romance in the novel as Bill meets a woman named Josella who is being held captive by a blind man, and Bill rescues her. We also meet a gentleman named Coker who has the idea that it is up to the blind people. We also meet Coker, who has the idea that it is up to the sighted people to take care of the blind people. And he captures some and cuffs them to two blind people to ensure that they stay with the groups that he is assigned, and he has divided the city up into areas where it is the job of the sighted person to find shelter, food, supplies for at least 20 or more people. In other words, one individual taking care of the other group. And keep in mind that stores are no longer open, hospitals no longer function as they used to. The world has completely changed. We also meet Michael Beadley, who has a different idea and who is looking long term. In other words, he doesn't believe that staying in the city is a good idea. Although there are still plenty of resources, his concept is to get out to the country, take a number of supplies and people with him, and begin to rebuild and renew. Because he understands that help isn't coming. This event has happened around the globe, and in order to be sustaining over time, they need to have things up and running and be self-sufficient. A third character that we meet has a different opinion, and his approach is based on being more military. And you have a reigning group. They also decide who is going to be with what group and how everything's going to work out, and have no problems about separating families who may be sighted in order to assign them to different locations to support the blind. It brings up a lot of different questions on when you know that the world has completely turned upside down, what do you look at and how do you make the decisions on who to help and what's the best way to move forward? What Coker realizes during his plan is that to have one person in charge of that many people without the usual supports that you would have in a functional city doesn't work out. And in a very short time, suddenly disease is spreading throughout the people. And I'm not quite sure why that disease would have started up so quickly, whether it had something to do with the meteor shower that caused the blindness or other issues. But in any case, Coker quickly realizes that his plan, although well-meaning, definitely did not work out in the best interest of the people that he was trying to take care of. The twist in the story that complicates things for the humans that are trying to survive is that supplies obviously are running out. There is disease spreading among people, but what they've also begun to realize is that the Triffids are now hunting humans. They realize that the Triffids can walk and move, they can communicate and function as a group, and have realized that many of the humans are not able to see where they are, and for those that do, the Triffids are learning to hide and have begun hunting them. So it's quite an interesting novel that has suspense, adventure, romance, and it's definitely worth a read. The nice thing is, it's a fairly short read. So hopefully you'll give it a try and check it out. Also, if you enjoy the old B movies from years ago, there is a movie on Day of the Triffids that was made in 1963. It definitely isn't scary, and there are some variations from the novel, as there always are. but it's definitely worth a good chuckle and brings across the point again of how different people, as well intentioned as it may be, make their decisions on what is best for the collective. The next novel that I would like to talk about today is The Chrysalids by John Wyndham. And my little buddy Panther has decided he only works one video a day, so he probably won't be making another appearance this time. The Chrysalids is the second novel by John Wyndham that I read when I was in high school. Again, that was back in the 1970s, and a very different world than we now live in 2022. The Chrysalids had a huge impact on me because it is a story about what happens to people who are different, how they're treated, and perceptions. Our novel follows the main character, David Strum, who is a young boy that has a secret that he knows he needs to keep because his very life could depend on it. His father, quite active in their community, is diligent about seeking out anything and anyone that is different, whether that's plants, animals, or humans. Throughout the novel, we understand early on that something has happened to the human society. And there are constant references throughout about the old people and the structures and different types of land. Some where they are able to grow crops and thrive, and other areas that have creatures that have odd changes and mutations, and also areas that are completely devastated and cannot be inhabited and nothing grows there. David's worldview begins to change after he meets a little girl named Sophie, and he realizes that she has 6 toes. David, throughout his life, has been told that anything different is unacceptable and it's a blasphemy. So when he meets Sophie, he begins to realize that she isn't different than him just because she has 6 toes. And he begins to question everything that he has been told. Now, unfortunately, Sophie and her family are discovered, and in his world, if there is someone with a deviation, they are sent away from the community to live in something called the fringes. The fringes become a main factor in the story because the people who live there come into the communities to raid them for tools, supplies, livestock, and sometimes even children. David has a small group of friends that include his cousin and younger sister, who all communicate telepathically. At first, they don't really think much of it because, of course, when they're talking about mutations and those who are different, it's always about something that's visible and seen. As the novel progresses, David begins to realize that having this skill is definitely a danger. Unfortunately, when 2 of his friends are taken captive and questioned, David realizes that it is more dangerous to stay in the village than it is to leave and try and find somewhere else to live when 2 of their friends are captured. Thanks to his uncle Axel, David, his cousin Rosalind, and his youngest sister Petra are able to escape. The irony about the escape? They manage it because of 2 large horses that are mutants but because they were considered useful on farms, they were not slaughtered as the other animals that have mutations. This again brings up that whole, when do you make an exception and who gets to decide when that exception is the right one? The story continues to follow David, Rosalind, and Petra, the different areas that they go into, and they come upon the fringes, where not only do they discover the people who live there and the conditions that they live in, but David reconnects with his old friend Sophie and learns that after she was discovered by his father, she was sent to the fringes. Throughout the novel, David struggles with what he was taught and what he's now come to believe based on his experiences with people like Sophie and the friends that he has telepathic communications with. We are not told what happened to the old people and how the devastation came about. Perhaps it had to do with something nuclear or atomic, and in our world we've certainly seen the results of that. The novel was written 10 years after the US atomic bombs that were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And these may have been a factor in how Wyndham explained what the world would be like after something of that nature on a much larger scale. Since John Wyndham's novel, there have been 3 other major nuclear disasters. There's been Chernobyl in Russia, 3 Mile Island in Pennsylvania, United States, and Fukushima in Japan in 2011. After the earthquake and the tsunami hit Japan, the impact of that was so huge that it literally changed the Earth's axis. In other words, events of this nature have big consequences, not just in the short term, but the long term. It's difficult to imagine something on a scale that the characters in the Chrysalids are dealing with. But it does bring up a lot of interesting questions on how, as a society, we look at people who may be different or not share our same viewpoint. In order for humanity to move forward, whatever situation they're facing, it is important to communicate, work together, and understand that people have the same goal, different ways of reaching them, and it's by working together that will make the difference. The Chrysalids had a big impact on me, reading this as a teenager in high school with an interest in a variety of subjects. And sometimes people would get kind of freaked out because of my interest in ancient civilizations and ghosts and other things. So I learned to keep quiet about that. That was just easier than having to deal with people's judgment. Now, I'm 58 years old, and I really don't worry about what other people think in regards to my interests and my studies. Personally, I enjoy finding out about different things. I enjoy reading, I enjoy researching, and hopefully on this channel, I'll be able to connect with other people who likewise have a variety of interests, and I look forward to reading your comments. If you've enjoyed this video, please be sure to hit the like button. And if you're interested in more content about books and the different subjects that they relate to, Please be sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you know when I upload new content. If you've read Day of the Triffids or the Chrysalids, please be sure to leave me a comment below and let me know what your thoughts were about the novel. I appreciate your time, and until next time, happy reading! You helping me get ready? Okay, we're almost ready to start. We're almost ready.